The morning started like any other Tuesday for Daniel Rivera. He woke up at 5:30, made himself a strong cup of coffee, and checked his emails one last time before heading to the airport. His stomach was doing flips not because he was nervous about flying, but because of what waited for him in Seattle. This meeting could save his company, or it could be the final nail in the coffin. Daniel owned a small tech startup that processed online payments for businesses. It wasn't anything fancy or groundbreaking, just a reliable service that helped small shops accept credit cards and digital transactions. For 3 years, things had been going okay. Not great, but okay. Then the bigger companies started dropping their prices and his clients began leaving one by one. Now he was down to his last few accounts, and if he didn't land this new investor in Seattle, he'd have to shut everything down and let his small team go. The drive to Denver International Airport took 40 minutes. Daniel kept rehearsing his pitch in his head, going over the numbers, the projections, the reasons why someone should believe in his company when he was barely believing in it himself. He parked in long-term parking, grabbed his carry-on bag, and headed inside. The airport was packed. It always was, but somehow Tuesday mornings felt even more chaotic than usual. Business travelers rushing to meetings, families dragging sleepy children toward vacation gates, everyone moving with that peculiar airport urgency. Daniel checked the departure board and felt his heart sink. His flight was boarding in 30 minutes and he was still at the wrong end of the terminal. He started walking fast, weaving between slow-moving groups and dodging coffee carts. His mind was still half-focused on his presentation slides, mentally changing one of the graphs that didn't look quite right. That's when he nearly tripped over the suitcase. It was lying on its side in the middle of the corridor near Gate B-17. Its contents spilled across the shiny airport floor. Pill bottles, a glasses case, some knitting needles with purple yarn, and what looked like an old photo album with pictures sliding out. An elderly woman was kneeling beside the mess, trying to gather everything with shaking hands. People were walking around her like water flowing around a rock, barely glancing down. A few looked annoyed, as if she was deliberately blocking their path. Daniel stopped. He knew he shouldn't. He knew his flight was boarding soon and he couldn't miss it. This meeting was too important. His whole future depended on it. But watching this woman struggle alone while hundreds of people ignored her made something twist in his chest. He set down his bag and knelt beside her. "Here, let me help you with that." The woman looked up, startled. She had kind eyes behind her glasses, but they were wet with tears of frustration. "Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm making such a mess. This stupid suitcase just tipped over and everything fell out, and I don't know how to work these modern zippers properly and—" "It's okay," Daniel said gently, already gathering the scattered items. "These airport floors are slippery. Happens all the time." It didn't happen all the time, but it seemed like the right thing to say. He carefully picked up each prescription bottle, checking the labels to make sure he got them all. There were 6 different medications. The photo album had fallen open to a picture of a young couple on their wedding day, probably from the 1960s based on the style. The woman in the photo was clearly the same person kneeling beside him now, just 50-some years younger. "That's me and Harold," she said softly, noticing where he was looking. 53 years we were married. He passed 6 months ago. "I'm sorry," Daniel said, and meant it. He closed the album carefully and placed it in her suitcase. "This is my first time flying alone," she continued, her voice wavering. "Harold always handled everything. The tickets, the bags, all of it. I'm going to visit my daughter in Phoenix. She wanted to come get me, but I told her I could do it myself. Now I'm not so sure." Daniel helped her stand up, then righted her suitcase. One of the wheels was slightly bent, which explained why it had tipped. "What gate are you heading to?" "C-12, I think. Or maybe it's C-21, I have it written down somewhere." She fumbled with her purse, pulling out a crumpled boarding pass. "C-12, Daniel confirmed, reading it over her shoulder. "That's actually not too far. I can walk you there if you'd like." "Oh, I couldn't ask you to do that. You must be in a hurry." She was right, he was. His own gate was in the opposite direction, and the clock on the wall told him he had maybe 20 minutes before they closed the boarding door. But looking at this woman, alone and overwhelmed in a busy airport, reminded him of his own mother. She'd been widowed young, and he remembered how hard it had been for her to do even simple things without his father there. "It's on my way," he lied. "Come on, let's get you to your gate." They walked slowly through the terminal. The woman introduced herself as Dorothy, and she talked as they went. She told him about Harold, about how they'd met at a county fair when she was 19, how he'd won her a stuffed elephant that she kept for 50 years until their house flooded, and she had to throw it away, how empty the house felt now without his voice, his footsteps, his terrible jokes at breakfast. Daniel listened and nodded, occasionally steering her around other travelers. They passed his own gate, B42, and he saw people lining up to board. His chest tightened, but he kept walking. When they reached gate C12, Dorothy's flight wasn't boarding yet. She had almost 2 hours before departure. She'd gotten to the airport extremely early, probably because she was nervous about managing everything alone. Daniel helped her find a seat near the counter where the gate agents could keep an eye on her. "You're such a kind young man," Dorothy said, patting his hand. "Your mother raised you right." "She did her best," Daniel agreed, smiling. "You're going to be fine, Dorothy. When they call your group, just go up to that podium there, hand them your boarding pass, and follow everyone else onto the plane. The flight attendants will help you find your seat. What if I can't find my bag when I land? Go to baggage claim. Look for the carousel with your flight number on it. If you have any trouble, just ask someone who works there. They're used to helping people." Dorothy thanked him 3 more times before he finally managed to say goodbye. As he turned to leave, he checked his phone. His flight had started boarding 10 minutes ago. He broke into a run. By the time he reached gate B42, he was out of breath and sweating. The gate agent looked at him with barely concealed irritation. "You're the last one. They almost closed the door." "Sorry," Daniel panted, handing over his boarding pass. He made it onto the plane just as they were preparing to close the boarding door. His seat was in the back, and he had to squeeze past annoyed passengers who were already settled in. He collapsed into his window seat, his heart still racing, and pulled out his laptop to review his presentation one more time. What Daniel didn't know was that someone had been watching the entire thing. Across the terminal, sitting in a coffee shop with a clear view of gate B17, a woman in a dark blazer had observed him help Dorothy. She'd watched him walk the elderly woman to her gate despite clearly being in a hurry. She'd seen him miss the initial boarding call for his own flight because he was making sure a stranger was safe and comfortable. The woman made a note in the small leather journal she always carried. She'd been following Daniel Rivera for 3 weeks now, and this was the first genuinely spontaneous action she'd seen him take. It was a small detail, almost meaningless in the larger investigation, but she wrote it down anyway, not knowing that this moment of simple human kindness would become the most important observation in her entire case file. The meeting in Seattle went better than Daniel expected. The investor liked his pitch, asked good questions, and promised to get back to him within a week. Daniel flew home feeling lighter than he had in months. Maybe things were finally turning around. Maybe he wouldn't have to shut down the company after all. That optimistic feeling lasted exactly 2 days. Wednesday morning, Daniel woke up to 17 missed calls. His phone started ringing again before he could even check the voicemails. It was his business partner, Tommy Chen. They'd been friends since college, roommates for 3 years, and business partners for the last 5. Tommy's voice on the phone sounded strange. Distant. Wrong. "Don't come to the office today," Tommy said. "What? Why not? Did something happen with the servers?" "Just stay home, Daniel." "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Then Tommy hung up. Daniel stared at his phone, confused and increasingly worried. He tried calling back 3 times, but Tommy didn't answer. He called their office manager, Lisa, but her phone went straight to voicemail too. Something was very wrong. Daniel got dressed and drove to the office anyway. When he pulled into the parking lot, he saw 2 black SUVs parked near the entrance. His stomach dropped. The front door of their small office building was propped open, and people in dark jackets were carrying out boxes. Lots of boxes. He got out of his car slowly, his legs feeling weak. As he approached the door, a man in a suit stepped in front of him. The jacket had 3 letters printed on the back in bright yellow, FBI. "Daniel Rivera?" the man asked. "Yes, what's happening?" "Where's Tommy?" "Mr. Chen was arrested this morning. I need you to come with me, please." The next few hours felt like a nightmare. Daniel sat in a small room at a federal building downtown, answering questions from 2 agents. They wanted to know everything about his company, about Tommy, about their clients, about money. Always about the money. Where it came from, where it went, how it was processed. Daniel answered honestly because he had nothing to hide. Or at least he thought he had nothing to hide. But with each question, He began to realize how little he actually knew about what Tommy had been doing. "You're telling me you never questioned the Enterprise Solutions accounts?" one of the agents asked. She was a woman in her late 30s with sharp eyes and an expression that gave nothing away. "Tommy handled the big clients," Daniel explained for the third time. "That was our arrangement. I built the software and maintained the systems. He did sales and client relations. It worked for us. For 5 years, you never once looked at the transaction logs for these accounts? I mean, I saw the numbers. I knew we were processing payments. But Tommy said they were international charities and NGOs that needed discrete payment processing because they worked in sensitive regions. He showed me some of their websites. It all looked legitimate." The agent slid a folder across the table. Inside were printouts of transaction records. Millions of dollars flowing through their small company's payment platform. The numbers made Daniel's head spin. "Mr. Rivera, your company processed over $12 million in illegal transactions over the past 18 months. These weren't charities. This was money laundering for an international criminal organization." Daniel felt like he might throw up. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. Your business partner has been cooperating with this organization for almost 2 years. He built backdoors into your payment system specifically to hide these transactions from you and from standard banking oversight. That's impossible. Tommy wouldn't do that. We've been friends for over a decade." The agent's expression softened slightly, but only slightly. "Friendships can be complicated, Mr. Rivera. People aren't always who we think they are." They questioned him for 6 more hours. They went through his emails, his text messages, his bank accounts. They asked about trips he'd taken, purchases he'd made, people he'd met. Daniel cooperated with everything because the alternative was looking guilty, and he wasn't guilty. He couldn't be. He'd just been running a business with his best friend. Except his best friend had been lying to him for 2 years. When they finally let him go home that evening, the agent who'd been asking most of the questions walked him to the lobby. Her name was Agent Rebecca Walsh, and she'd been watching him carefully all day. "You're not under arrest," she said, "but don't leave town. We're still investigating your level of involvement." "I wasn't involved. I keep telling you that." "I believe you might not have known the specifics," Agent Walsh said carefully, "but the question is whether you should have known. Whether you were willfully ignorant. That matters legally." Daniel drove home in a daze. His phone kept buzzing with messages. News about Tommy's arrest had already spread through Seattle's small tech community. Clients were calling, demanding answers. His employees were panicking. The investor from Seattle had already sent an email withdrawing his offer. Over the next 3 weeks, Daniel's life fell apart piece by piece. The FBI seized all of his computers, his servers, even his personal laptop. They froze his bank accounts pending the investigation. Without access to their systems or their money, the company couldn't operate. His 6 employees all quit within a week, needing to find stable jobs before they got caught up in whatever legal mess was coming. The worst part wasn't the business collapsing. It was the looks people gave him. Former clients who wouldn't return his calls. Other business owners who suddenly didn't recognize him at the coffee shop they all frequented. His own mother asked him very carefully if there was anything he needed to tell her about what he'd been doing for the past 5 years. "I wasn't doing anything wrong, Mom," he'd said, his voice breaking. "I was just building software. I was just trying to run a business. I know, sweetie, I know." But even she sounded uncertain. Daniel tried to visit Tommy in jail once. He needed answers. He needed to understand how his best friend could do this to him, to their company, to everything they'd built together. But Tommy refused to see him. The guard at the jail said Tommy had put Daniel on a list of people he wouldn't accept visits from. That hurt more than anything else. 4 weeks after Tommy's arrest, Agent Walsh showed up at Daniel's apartment. It was late, almost 9 at night. He answered the door in sweatpants and an old t-shirt, looking like he hadn't slept properly in days. He hadn't. "Can I come in?" she asked. Daniel stepped aside. His apartment was a mess. Empty coffee cups on the table, legal documents scattered everywhere. He'd been trying to find a lawyer he could afford, which was difficult when all his money was frozen and he was technically unemployed. Agent Walsh sat down on his couch without waiting for an invitation. She pulled out a tablet and showed him something. It was surveillance footage from an airport. It took Daniel a moment to recognize himself. It was from the day he'd helped that elderly woman, Dorothy. The footage showed him stopping, helping her gather her things, walking her to her gate. "I was there that day," Agent Walsh said. "I've been following you for 3 weeks at that point, as part of the investigation into your company. I saw you help that woman even though you were clearly in a hurry. You missed your boarding call because you were making sure she got to her gate safely." Daniel stared at the screen, confused. "Okay, so what?" "So we've been analyzing Tommy's communications with the criminal organization he was working for. And we found something interesting." She swiped to a different screen, showing encrypted messages. "They were watching you too that day. Not as law enforcement, as potential recruitment." "What are you talking about?" "This organization tests people, Mr. Rivera. They stage scenarios in public places to see how people react. They're looking for certain personality types, people who are smart but desperate, people who might be willing to bend rules, but also people who aren't completely ethical, because those people are risky." Agent Walsh leaned forward. "You failed their test, or passed it depending on how you look at it. You were too genuinely kind. You filed a complaint with airport administration about accessibility for elderly travelers. You missed your flight helping a complete stranger. Their behavioral analyst concluded you were too ethical for recruitment." Daniel didn't know what to say. The idea that he'd been tested without knowing it made his skin crawl. "Tommy was supposed to keep you in the dark," Agent Walsh continued. "You were never meant to be part of the criminal operation. They just needed your technology and your reputation. Tommy built the illegal infrastructure around you, keeping you focused on the legitimate clients while he handled everything else." "So I'm cleared?" Daniel asked, hope rising in his chest for the first time in weeks. Agent Walsh's expression was complicated. "It's not that simple, but I've been arguing with my superiors that you're a victim here, not a perpetrator. The evidence supports that. However, the Department of Justice wants more than just my opinion." She closed her tablet and looked at him directly. "They want your cooperation in bringing down the rest of this organization. And Mr. Rivera, I need to know if you're willing to help us do that." Daniel looked at this federal agent sitting in his messy apartment, offering him a way out of the nightmare his life had become. But he could tell from her tone that whatever she was asking wouldn't be simple or safe. "What kind of cooperation?" he asked quietly. Agent Walsh took a deep breath. "The kind that requires you to go undercover. The kind that could clear your name completely. And the kind that could also get you killed if something goes wrong." Daniel didn't sleep that night. He sat on his couch until sunrise, staring at the business card Agent Walsh had left on his coffee table. Her phone number was printed in simple black letters. One call could change everything, or end everything. Going undercover sounded like something from a movie, not something that happened to regular people who just wanted to run a small tech company. Daniel wasn't brave. He wasn't a hero. He was just a guy who'd trusted the wrong person and now his entire life was destroyed because of it. But what choice did he really have? Agent Walsh had been clear about his options. Help them catch the criminals or spend the next few years fighting to prove his innocence in court. Even if he eventually won, his reputation would be ruined forever. No one would hire him. No one would invest in his ideas. He'd be that guy who maybe was involved in money laundering or maybe wasn't, but either way, who wants to take that risk? At 7 in the morning, Daniel called the number. Agent Walsh answered on the second ring like she'd been waiting. "I'll do it," he said. "I'll help you. Just tell me what I need to do." 3 days later, Daniel sat in a secure FBI office learning how to wear a wire. The device was smaller than he expected, barely bigger than a button, and it would be sewn into the lining of his jacket. There was also a backup recording device that would look like a regular pen in his shirt pocket. "Don't touch them," Agent Walsh instructed. "Don't fidget with your jacket. Don't click the pen nervously. Just act natural and let the equipment do its job." "Act natural," Daniel repeated. "Right. While secretly recording dangerous criminals. That should be easy," Agent Walsh almost smiled. "Your nervousness will actually help. You're supposed to be desperate and angry. That's the whole point. Tommy betrayed you. The FBI froze your assets. You lost everything. That anger is real and they'll sense it. Use it." The plan was complicated but simple at its core. The FBI would stage a very public falling out with Daniel. They'd leak documents to a few tech blogs suggesting that Daniel was suing the federal government for wrongful persecution. He'd start posting on social media about how the system had abandoned him, how he'd done nothing wrong but was being treated like a criminal anyway. It felt wrong, putting all of that out into the world. His mother would see it. His friends would see it. But Agent Walsh assured him they'd clear everything up once the operation was over. His name would be fully restored. For now, though, he needed to look like a man who'd lost faith in doing things the legal way. "They'll approach you," Agent Walsh explained. "Not immediately. They'll watch for a while, make sure your anger is genuine. But Tommy's arrest left a gap in their operation. They need someone with your technical skills, someone who understands payment processing and can rebuild what they lost. They'll come to you. And if they don't, they will. We've made sure the right people see your posts. They're already watching your social media. Just be patient." Being patient was harder than Daniel expected. For 2 weeks, nothing happened. He posted bitter messages online about the FBI, about the justice system, about how innocent people got destroyed while the real criminals got away. Some of his old friends reached out, concerned. He had to ignore them, which felt terrible. His mother called crying, asking what was happening to him. That was the worst call he'd ever had to make, lying to her, telling her he was fine when he absolutely wasn't. Then, on a Thursday evening, someone approached him. Daniel was at a coffee shop, his usual place, working on his laptop. He was actually doing real work, trying to build a portfolio site so he could freelance once this nightmare was over. A woman sat down at the table next to him. She was maybe 40, dressed in an expensive business suit with dark hair pulled back in a neat bun. She didn't look at him at first. She just ordered a coffee and pulled out her own laptop. But after about 15 minutes, she glanced over at his screen. "That's nice code," she said casually. "Clean structure. You don't see that often anymore." Daniel looked up, surprised. "Thanks. Just working on a personal project." "I'm Vanessa," she said, extending her hand. "I work in tech consulting." Always interesting to see what other developers are building. They talked for a few minutes about programming languages and frameworks. Normal tech talk. But there was something in the way she looked at him, like she was assessing him, measuring him against some invisible standard. "I heard about what happened with your company," Vanessa said, her voice dropping lower. "The FBI thing. That must have been rough." Daniel's heart rate picked up, but he tried to keep his expression neutral. "Yeah, it's been terrible. My business partner did something illegal, and somehow I'm the one being punished for it." "The system isn't fair," Vanessa said, nodding sympathetically. "Talented people get burned all the time by bureaucrats who don't understand how business actually works." "Tell me about it." "I built something good, something useful, and now it's all gone because someone else made bad choices." Vanessa stirred her coffee slowly. "What if I told you there are opportunities for developers like you? People who understand the technical side but who've been, let's say, disillusioned by how the establishment operates." This was it. This was the moment Agent Walsh had prepared him for. Daniel felt the wire against his chest, hidden and recording every word. "I'd say I'm listening," Daniel replied carefully. "There's a company I work with. They process international payments for clients who need discretion." "Nothing illegal," she added quickly. "Just businesses that operate in complicated regulatory environments. They need someone who can build secure systems and keep things running smoothly." "What kind of businesses?" "Import-export mostly. Some international charity work. The kind of organizations that move money across borders and prefer to keep their operations private." "You understand." Daniel understood perfectly. She was describing exactly what Tommy had been doing, just wrapped in prettier language. "The pay would be substantial," Vanessa continued. "Enough to help you rebuild. Enough to make the last few months of trouble worth it." "I don't want to get into more legal problems," Daniel said, which was completely true. "You won't. This is all above board. We just value our privacy and we compensate people well for their discretion and their skills." She pulled out a business card and slid it across the table. "Think about it. If you're interested, give me a call. We can talk more about the specifics." Daniel took the card. It was simple, expensive looking. Just her name and a phone number. "No company name, no address. I'll think about it," he said. Vanessa smiled. "I hope you do. Talented people like you shouldn't be struggling. You should be appreciated for what you can do." She left a few minutes later. Daniel sat there staring at the business card, his coffee getting cold. His hands were shaking slightly. He'd done it. He'd made contact. But this was just the beginning, and the beginning was already terrifying. That evening, Daniel met with Agent Walsh in a parking garage. She listened to the recording from his wire, nodding as Vanessa's voice played back. "Perfect," Agent Walsh said. "You did great. She's exactly who we thought would make contact. Vanessa Ruiz. She's a recruiter for the organization, finds people with specific skills. What do I do now? Wait a few days. Let her think you're considering it. Then call her. Show interest, but not too much. You're cautious because of what happened with Tommy. You want details before you commit to anything. And then what? Then we see how deep the rabbit hole goes. Daniel spent the next 3 days in a state of constant anxiety. He jumped every time his phone rang. He couldn't eat properly. He kept touching his jacket where the wire had been, even though he wasn't wearing it anymore. On Sunday afternoon, he called the number on Vanessa's card. She answered immediately, like she'd been expecting his call. "I've been thinking about what you said," Daniel told her, "about opportunities for people with my skills. I'd like to know more." "I'm glad to hear that," Vanessa said warmly. "Why don't we meet tomorrow? I can introduce you to some colleagues and we can discuss the specifics of what we're looking for." "Where?" "There's a restaurant downtown. Antonio's, do you know it?" Daniel didn't, but he said yes anyway. "Meet me there at 7. Come alone." "And Daniel?" Her voice changed slightly, became more serious. "This conversation needs to stay between us. No social media post. No telling friends. This opportunity is for people who understand the value of discretion." "I understand." After he hung up, Daniel immediately called Agent Walsh. She answered on the first ring. "They want to meet tomorrow night," he said. "At Antonio's restaurant. 7 o'clock. We'll be there," Agent Walsh assured him. "Not in the restaurant, but close by. You'll be wired again. If anything feels wrong, if you feel unsafe at any moment, just say the phrase, 'I need some fresh air.' That's the signal to pull you out." "Okay. I need some fresh air." "Got it, Daniel," Agent Walsh said, and her voice was gentler than usual. "You're doing the right thing. I know it doesn't feel that way, but you are." Daniel wanted to believe her. He really did. But as he sat in his apartment that evening, preparing for what came next, all he could think about was how many ways this could go wrong. How one mistake, one wrong word could mean he'd never see his mother again, never get his life back, never be anything other than the man who tried to be brave and failed. He looked at his reflection in the bathroom mirror. He looked tired, scared. Nothing like the confident developer who'd rushed through an airport just a few weeks ago, worried about nothing more than missing a flight. That version of himself felt like a different person entirely. Someone who'd lived in a simpler world where the biggest problems were losing clients and disappointing investors. Now he was going undercover to catch criminals. And tomorrow night, he'd have to sit across from them and pretend he was one of them. He'd have to lie convincingly enough to make them trust him, while knowing that if they discovered the truth, he might not make it home. Daniel turned off the bathroom light and went to bed, though he knew he wouldn't sleep. Tomorrow would change everything one way or another. He just had to hope he was ready for it. Daniel arrived at Antonio's restaurant 15 minutes early. He sat in his car across the street watching people go in and out, trying to calm his racing heart. The wire was hidden in his jacket again, and the pen recorder was clipped to his pocket. Agent Walsh and her team were positioned somewhere nearby, listening to everything. That should have made him feel safer, but it didn't. At exactly 7 o'clock, he walked into the restaurant. It was nicer than he expected, with dim lighting and white tablecloths. A hostess greeted him with a professional smile. "I'm meeting someone," Daniel said. "Vanessa." "Right this way." She led him to a table in the back corner, away from other diners. Vanessa was already there, but she wasn't alone. 2 men sat with her. One was older, maybe in his 60s, with silver hair and an expensive suit. The other was younger, closer to Daniel's age, with sharp eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. "Daniel, glad you could make it," Vanessa said, gesturing to the empty chair. "This is Mr. Kovac and his associate, Leo." Daniel shook hands with both men, trying not to let his nervousness show. Mr. Kovac's handshake was firm, businesslike. Leo's was brief, almost dismissive. "Vanessa tells us you have impressive technical skills," Mr. Kovac said once Daniel sat down. His accent was slight but noticeable, Eastern European maybe, and that you've had some unfortunate experiences with federal authorities. "My business partner got arrested for money laundering," Daniel said, sticking to the story. "I had nothing to do with what he was doing, but the FBI treated me like a criminal anyway. Froze my accounts, destroyed my company, ruined my reputation. A common story," Mr. Kovac said, nodding sympathetically. Government agencies often punish innocent people while letting the truly guilty walk free. It's one of the flaws of the current system. A waiter appeared and took their drink orders. Daniel asked for water, not trusting himself to drink anything stronger. His mouth was dry and his palms were sweating. "We represent a network of international businesses," Mr. Kovac continued once the waiter left. "Companies that operate in multiple countries moving goods and services across borders. As you can imagine, international finance can be complicated. Different regulations in different countries. Different banking systems. Different levels of government interference." "I understand," Daniel said. "What we need is someone who can build and maintain secure payment processing systems. Systems that can handle transactions efficiently while maintaining client privacy. Your previous company did exactly this kind of work, correct?" "It did. I built the core platform." "Tommy handled the client side." Leo spoke for the first time. "Vanessa says the FBI seized your systems. How much of your work can you rebuild from memory?" This was a test question. Daniel knew it. If he said he could rebuild everything perfectly, they'd be suspicious. No one remembers every line of code. But if he said he couldn't rebuild anything, he'd be useless to them. "I can rebuild the architecture and the main processing logic," Daniel said carefully. "I'd need time to recreate some of the specific integrations and security features. But the core system? I know it inside and out. I designed it." Mr. Kovac and Leo exchanged a look. Some silent communication passed between them. "We'd want to see a demonstration," Leo said. "Proof that you can actually deliver what you're claiming." "That's fair." "What kind of demonstration?" "Build us a prototype," Mr. Kovac said. "Something that can handle encrypted transactions, route them through multiple accounts to obscure the trail, and generate clean documentation that would pass a basic audit." "Can you do that?" Daniel's stomach twisted. They were asking him to build exactly the kind of system that had gotten Tommy arrested. The kind of system designed specifically for money laundering. "I can do that," he said, hoping Agent Walsh was hearing every word. "But I need to be clear about something. I'm not interested in going to prison. Whatever I build, it needs to be defensible. I need assurances that this is legitimate business." Mr. Kovac smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Of course. Everything we do operates within legal boundaries. We simply prefer privacy. Our clients value discretion. There's nothing illegal about that." They were lying and everyone at the table knew it, but this was the game they played. Plausible deniability wrapped in business language. "How much time do I have to build this prototype?" Daniel asked. 2 weeks, Leo said. "We'll provide you with specifications and test data. You build the system, demonstrate it works, and then we discuss terms of employment." "And compensation?" "If your prototype meets our standards," Mr. Kovac said, "we'd start you at $15,000 per month, plus performance bonuses based on system uptime and transaction volume. After 6 months, assuming everything goes well, that base salary doubles." Daniel tried not to react to the numbers. $15,000 a month was more than he'd been paying himself from his own company. It was the kind of money that could solve all his financial problems. If he were actually considering working for criminals, which he absolutely wasn't, it would be tempting. He could understand how Tommy had fallen into this trap. "I'll need equipment," Daniel said. "A laptop with specific specs, access to certain software tools." "Make a list," Vanessa said, sliding a notepad across the table. "We'll get you everything you need." They spent the next hour discussing technical details. What programming languages to use, what security protocols to implement, how to structure the data flow. Daniel took notes, asked questions, played the role of a developer genuinely interested in solving their technical problems, all while the wire in his jacket recorded every word. When dinner was over, Mr. Kovac picked up the check. "We'll be in touch tomorrow with the equipment and specifications. You'll work from home. We prefer our developers to maintain their normal lives, normal patterns. Less suspicious that way." "Makes sense," Daniel agreed. In the parking lot, Leo walked Daniel to his car. "One more thing," Leo said, his voice low. "We know you've been through a difficult time. We know you're angry at the system. But we need to know you're committed. That you're not going to have second thoughts and run to the authorities." Daniel met his gaze. "I'm not going back to the FBI. They made it clear they don't care about innocent people. I need to rebuild my life, and I can't do that the conventional way anymore." "They took that option away from me." Leo studied him for a long moment. "Good. Because if we ever discovered someone was working with law enforcement, that would be very bad for everyone involved. We have long memories and longer reach. It was a threat, clear and simple. Daniel felt ice run down his spine. I understand, he said. Leo nodded and walked away. Daniel got in his car, his hands shaking so badly he could barely get the key in the ignition. He drove 3 blocks before pulling into an empty parking lot. That's when Agent Walsh appeared, getting into his passenger seat from a car that had been following him. You did great, she said immediately. We got everything. Kovac asking you to build money laundering software. Leo's threat at the end. That's exactly what we needed. He threatened me, Daniel said, his voice not quite steady. He said they have long reach. What if they find out? What if they're watching my apartment right now? We have agents monitoring your building. You're safe. But Daniel, I need you to hold it together. I know that was scary. But we're building a strong case. 2 more weeks of gathering evidence and we can bring them all down. 2 weeks, Daniel repeated. I have to do this for 2 more weeks. You can do this. I know you can. That man who stopped to help a stranger at the airport? That man is brave enough to do this. Daniel wanted to argue that helping an old lady with her luggage was completely different from going undercover with criminals who just threatened him, but he was too tired and too scared to argue. Over the next 2 weeks, Daniel lived a double life. During the day, he actually built the prototype system they'd requested. He had to make it look real, look functional, but Agent Walsh's technical team helped him build in flaws and backdoors that the FBI could exploit later. At night, he met with Agent Walsh, going over recordings, discussing strategy, preparing for the next phase. The equipment Vanessa had promised arrived at his apartment the next day. A high-end laptop, software licenses, even a new phone they wanted him to use for communication. Agent Walsh's team examined everything for tracking devices and found 3. They left them in place. If the criminals were watching, everything had to seem normal. Daniel's isolation grew worse. He couldn't talk to friends. He couldn't tell his mother what was really happening. He couldn't post on social media except for the bitter, angry messages that were part of his cover story. He was completely alone except for Agent Walsh and her team. On the 13th day, Daniel finished the prototype. He'd built exactly what they asked for, a payment processing system that could launder money through a complex series of transactions. It looked professional, functional, and completely illegal. Agent Walsh's team had documented every specification Kovac's organization had provided, creating an evidence trail that proved they were knowingly requesting criminal infrastructure. Daniel sent a message to Vanessa using the phone they'd given him. Prototype complete. Ready for demonstration. Her response came within minutes. Tomorrow night. 8 p.m., different location. We'll send address in the morning. That night, Daniel barely slept. Tomorrow would be the demonstration, the moment where he'd show them the system worked. And if everything went according to plan, it would also be the moment when the FBI moved in to arrest everyone. But plans didn't always work out. Daniel had learned that lesson the hard way. Sometimes the people you trusted betrayed you. Sometimes the system failed. Sometimes good people got hurt while trying to do the right thing. He sat on his couch watching the clock tick toward morning, and wondered if tomorrow would be the day his life got better or the day everything fell completely apart. In just a few hours, he'd find out which one it would be. Agent Walsh had told him to trust the process, to believe that justice would win. Daniel wanted to believe that. He really did. But after everything he'd been through, trust didn't come easy anymore. The only thing he knew for certain was that tomorrow, one way or another, this nightmare would start coming to an end. He just hoped he'd survive to see it. The address Vanessa sent was for a warehouse in an industrial area south of the city. Daniel had never been to this part of town before. Empty lots, closed factories, and buildings with broken windows lined the streets. It was the kind of place where bad things happened and nobody was around to see them. Agent Walsh met him 2 blocks away from the location at 7:30. Her team was positioned throughout the area, but they'd be staying back unless Daniel gave the emergency signal. Going in with obvious backup would blow his cover and potentially end the investigation before they could arrest everyone involved. We'll have eyes on the building, Agent Walsh said, adjusting the wire one more time under Daniel's jacket. But once you go inside, we won't be able to see what's happening. If anything feels wrong, anything at all, use the signal phrase. I need some fresh air, Daniel repeated. I remember. Good, and Daniel? This is almost over. After tonight, you can go back to your normal life. We have enough evidence to make arrests. We just need this final piece showing them accepting the criminal system and discussing how they'll use it." Daniel nodded, but his throat felt tight. He'd been telling himself for 2 weeks that this would end soon. But now that the end was actually here, he was more terrified than ever. He drove the last 2 blocks alone. The warehouse looked abandoned from the outside, but there were several expensive cars parked in the lot. Daniel recognized Vanessa's black sedan. He parked next to it, grabbed his laptop bag, and walked to the entrance. Leo was waiting at the door. "Phone," he said, holding out his hand. Daniel had expected this. He handed over the phone they'd given him. Leo pulled out some kind of scanning device and waved it over Daniel, checking for other electronics. Daniel's heart hammered as the device passed near the wire hidden in his jacket, but Leo didn't seem to notice anything unusual. "Come on," Leo said, leading him inside. The warehouse was mostly empty except for a table set up in the center with chairs and computer monitors. Mr. Kovac was there, along with Vanessa and 3 other people Daniel hadn't met before. All of them looked professional, like they could be executives at any legitimate company. That's what made them dangerous. They didn't look like criminals. "Daniel, good to see you," Mr. Kovac said, shaking his hand. "I trust you're ready to show us what you've built." "I am. I'll need to connect to your network to demonstrate the full functionality." One of the men Daniel didn't recognize stepped forward. "I'm Peter. I handle our technical security. I'll need to examine your laptop first, make sure you're not bringing any unwanted surprises." Daniel handed over his computer. This was another moment where everything could fall apart. The FBI's technical team had assured him that Peter wouldn't find anything suspicious, but Daniel's hands were sweating as he watched Peter open the laptop and start running diagnostic programs. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Peter's expression remained neutral, which Daniel hoped was a good sign. "It's clean," Peter finally said, handing the laptop back. "No tracking software, no hidden transmissions. You can connect to our isolated network." Daniel sat up at the table, his fingers moving across the keyboard. He'd practiced this demonstration dozens of times with Agent Walsh's team. He knew exactly what to show them and exactly what to say. "The system I've built can process transactions through multiple intermediary accounts," Daniel explained, pulling up the interface on the monitor. "Each transaction gets split and routed through different banks in different countries. By the time the money reaches its final destination, the original source is nearly impossible to trace." "Show us," Mr. Kovac said, leaning forward. Daniel ran a test transaction using the dummy data they'd provided. On the screen, $100,000 got broken into 17 smaller transactions, each one routing through a different account in a different country. Switzerland, Panama, Singapore, the Cayman Islands. The money moved in seconds, reassembling at a final account with documentation that made it look like legitimate business revenue. "Impressive," Vanessa said. "How secure is this against government audits?" "The system generates fake invoices and contracts for each transaction," Daniel explained. "If anyone looks at the paper trail, they'll see what appears to be legitimate business dealings. International consulting fees, licensing agreements, service contracts, all of it false, but all of it convincing." This was the moment that mattered. He was describing in clear terms a system built specifically to hide illegal activity. Agent Walsh was recording every word. Mr. Kovac stood up and walked around the table, studying the screen. "And you can scale this up? Handle much larger volumes? The system can process up to $50 million per month across multiple clients. Maybe more if we optimize the routing algorithms." "50 million, Mr. Kovac repeated and smiled. "That would be very useful for our operations. We currently move about 30 million monthly, but we're expanding. New partners, new revenue streams. We've been limited by our technical infrastructure." Leo spoke up. "What kind of revenue streams?" Mr. Kovac glanced at Daniel, then shrugged. "He's about to be part of the organization. He should know what we do. We facilitate financial transactions for businesses that can't use traditional banking, online gambling operations in restricted countries, pharmaceutical sales that bypass prescription requirements, import-export operations that avoid certain tax obligations. All very profitable, all requiring discretion." Daniel felt sick. They were describing a criminal empire much larger than he'd imagined. This wasn't just money laundering. This was facilitating illegal gambling, unlicensed drug sales, and tax evasion on a massive scale. I understand, Daniel said, keeping his voice steady. Discretion is part of the service. Exactly, Mr. Kovac said. Now let's discuss your employment terms. $15,000 per month to start, as we mentioned. You'll maintain the system, handle upgrades, and train backup personnel. You'll work from home mostly, but we'll need you to come to meetings like this periodically. Can you commit to that? This was it. The final piece of evidence Agent Walsh needed, an explicit offer to join a criminal organization, with full knowledge of what they were doing. Yes, Daniel said. I can commit to that. Mr. Kovac extended his hand. Welcome to the organization, Daniel. I think this is the beginning of a very profitable relationship. Daniel shook his hand, and that's when everything happened at once. The warehouse doors burst open. FBI, everyone on the ground. Now. Agents in tactical gear flooded into the building from 3 different entrances. Agent Walsh was at the front, her weapon drawn, shouting commands. Mr. Kovac's face went from confident to shocked to furious in the span of seconds. He looked at Daniel with pure hatred. You, he spat. You were working with them. On the ground. Agent Walsh shouted again. Hands where we can see them. Leo tried to run toward a back exit, but 2 agents tackled him before he made it 5 steps. Vanessa put her hands up immediately, smart enough to know resistance was pointless. Peter, the technical security guy who'd checked Daniel's laptop, looked like he might try to destroy the equipment. But agents reached him before he could move. Daniel stayed in his chair, his whole body shaking. It was over. It was actually over. Agent Walsh secured the scene, then came over to him. You okay? Daniel nodded, not trusting his voice. You did it, she said quietly. We got them all. And that confession from Kovac about their operations, that's going to help us shut down networks in 6 different states. Over the next hour, Daniel watched as the people who'd tried to recruit him were arrested and led away in handcuffs. Each one glared at him as they passed. Mr. Kovac muttered something in his language that Daniel was glad he couldn't understand. The hatred in his eyes was clear enough. The next few weeks were a blur of depositions, court appearances, and paperwork. Daniel testified before a grand jury about everything he'd witnessed. The evidence he'd gathered was extensive enough that most of the defendants took plea deals rather than go to trial. Mr. Kovac got 18 years in federal prison. Leo got 12. Tommy, who'd started everything, got 20 years for his earlier cooperation with the organization. Agent Walsh kept her promise. Daniel's name was cleared completely. The FBI issued a formal statement explaining that he'd been an innocent victim of his business partner's crimes and had cooperated fully with law enforcement to bring down a major criminal organization. His frozen bank accounts were released. The legal cloud hanging over him disappeared. But clearing his name didn't mean everything went back to normal. The tech industry was cautious about hiring someone connected to such a high-profile case, even as the victim. Investors weren't returning his calls. His old clients had moved on to other payment processors. Starting over wasn't as simple as Agent Walsh had made it sound. 3 months after the arrests, Daniel was in his apartment working on freelance coding projects, trying to figure out what came next, when he got an unexpected phone call. A cybersecurity firm called Sentinel Solutions wanted to interview him. They specialized in helping companies protect themselves from financial fraud.